Ice-cold wind sliced through the shattered wooden shutters and violently snapped the soldier back into consciousness. Ling Chuan gasped for air as a chaotic torrent of foreign memories violently collided with his tactical elite upbringing. He remembered dying in a blazing hail of gunfire during a high-stakes special forces operation just moments ago. Yet, the weak hands he now stared at belonged to Ling Ergo, a cowardly and thoroughly bullied low-ranking soldier. This miserable host body was stationed at the notorious Wolf Beacon Pass, a frozen purgatory for the military's outcasts. The elite operative quickly suppressed the lingering disorientation and forced his new muscles to adapt. Sudden heavy footsteps thudded loudly against the floor outside, accompanied by coarse, mocking laughter. The heavy wooden door was kicked off its latch, slamming violently against the stone wall to reveal a massive figure. Squad leader Lu Wu strode into the room, holding a heavy leather whip that dragged lazily along the floor. The corrupt commander sneered at the sight of the boy, fully expecting the usual whimpering and begging. Lu Wu demanded the boy hand over his meager winter rations, raising his fist to enforce the daily theft. Instead of cowering, Ling Chuan slowly stood up, his eyes entirely devoid of the previous owner's paralyzing fear. The sudden shift in the weakling's posture caused the squad leader to hesitate for a brief, uncertain fraction of a second. Infuriated by this uncharacteristic defiance, Lu Wu swung the heavy leather whip straight toward the boy's face. Relying on deeply ingrained special forces reflexes, Ling Chuan sidestepped the trajectory with flawless precision. Before the commander could recover his balance, Ling Chuan's hand shot forward like a striking viper. He twisted the thick wrist violently downward, utilizing the heavy man's own momentum against him. Lu Wu bellowed in sheer disbelief as his massive frame was effortlessly brought down to one knee. Ling Chuan pressed a small, jagged piece of broken window glass firmly against the squad leader's throat. A single drop of dark blood welled up, freezing almost instantly against the cold, jagged edge. He whispered a calm but lethal warning that caused the corrupt commander's entire body to go rigid. Realizing the pathetic weakling had somehow transformed into a cold-blooded killer, Lu Wu nodded frantically. Ling Chuan shoved the heavy man away contemptuously, tossing the bloody shard of glass onto the floorboards. Loud brass horns suddenly echoed across the frozen courtyard, signaling an immediate general assembly. Lu Wu fled the room without looking back, leaving Ling Chuan to adjust his worn iron armor. Walking out into the biting wind, he observed hundreds of ragged soldiers gathering in the snow. The corrupt senior officers laughed loudly as they prepared to distribute the women like mere spoils of war. Ling Chuan stood quietly at the back of the crowd, scanning the cages with highly disciplined tactical precision. His gaze suddenly locked onto a solitary woman sitting silently in the corner of the furthest iron cage. Unlike the weeping prisoners around her, she possessed an aura of undeniable, unyielding nobility. Ling Chuan immediately recognized her from his inherited memories as Suli, a disgraced high-ranking noblewoman. He realized that claiming a woman of her hidden political stature would provide immense leverage for his future plans. Before the corrupt officers could begin their arbitrary selection, Ling Chuan stepped forward from the ranks. The entire garrison grew dead silent as the lowest-ranking scum boldly approached the main platform. Lu Wu, standing near the command stage with a heavily bandaged wrist, glared at him with pure hatred. Ling Chuan raised his voice clearly across the courtyard, demanding to claim the woman in the final cage as his wife. Inside the dark cage, Suli's eyes widened slightly as she stared at the strange, bold soldier. The commanding officer burst into a loud, mocking laugh, amused by the sheer audacity of the request. He granted the request instantly, viewing the pairing of a worthless soldier and a broken exile as a fitting joke. Ling Chuan picked up the heavy iron key and walked steadily toward the locked carriage. As the heavy gates swung open, he extended a firm, calloused hand toward the disgraced noblewoman. Suli hesitated for a long moment, searching his sharp eyes for any hidden signs of malice or cruelty. With a smooth, gentle pull, he guided her out of the cage and onto the solid ground of Wolfbeacon Pass. From the shadows of the barracks, a group of Lu Wu's loyal, heavily armed thuggish soldiers watched them with murderous intent. As the sun began to set behind the jagged northern peaks, the cold air grew thick with the unmistakable scent of a deadly upcoming ambush. The sharp crunch of snow under heavy leather boots echoed faintly through the dark mountain pass. Ling Chuan narrowed his eyes, tracking the subtle movements of shadows hiding along the frozen ridges. 3 treacherous soldiers from his own unit stepped out from behind the boulders with drawn blades. The lead attacker sneered, raising his heavy sword toward the young reincarnated operative. Ling Chuan slowly adjusted his stance, dropping his center of gravity like a seasoned apex predator. The air turned freezing cold as the first traitor lunged forward with a wild, desperate slash.
Relying on elite special forces reflexes, Ling Chuan ducked seamlessly under the whistling blade.
He slammed his palm upward into the attacker's exposed chin, shattering the man's jaw instantly. The remaining two ambushers gasped as their heavy comrade collapsed unconscious into the deep snow drifts. Ling Chuan snatched the fallen sword before it could even hit the frozen ground. The second traitor charged frantically, thrusting his iron spear directly at Ling Chuan's chest. With a precise sidestep, the elite operative deflected the spear shaft away with his captured blade. Ling Chuan spun inward and drove the cold iron sword straight through the spearman's armored chest. The final attacker dropped his weapon out of sheer terror, turning to flee into the forest. Ling Chuan picked up a discarded hunting bow resting against a nearby frozen boulder. He pulled a heavy iron-tipped arrow from the dead man's quiver and nocked it swiftly. Breathing slowly, he adjusted for the harsh northern crosswinds tearing through the open canyon. The bowstring groaned under the immense tactical force exerted by his steady arms. With a sudden release, the heavy arrow tore through the night air like a silent bullet. The arrow pierced the fleeing traitor's back, pinning him violently to a massive pine tree. Silence returned to Wolf Beacon Pass, broken only by the howling of the icy wind. Ling Chuan approached the bodies systematically, searching them for useful survival supplies. He recovered a pouch of coins, a bundle of dried meat, and several spare flintstones. Realizing the frontier demanded flawless marksmanship, he decided to master traditional archery immediately. The next morning, he set up crude wooden targets against the frozen cliffside behind his barracks. He began breaking down the physics of the bow, comparing it to his former modern firearm training. His new body lacked the specific muscle memory, causing his first few arrows to miss wildly. Ling Chuan ignored the burning pain in his raw fingertips and drew the string once more. He adjusted his breathing pattern, matching the rhythmic expansion of his chest to his mechanical release. Thwack! The heavy iron arrow slammed directly into the absolute center of the wooden target. For hours, he repeated the motion, forcing his muscles to adapt to the lethal weapon. By afternoon, he could strike moving targets, executing precise shots while sprinting through deep snow. Suli watched quietly from the shadows of the barracks doorway, her expression filled with profound awe. She realized this man was no longer the weak, easily bullied soldier the rumors described. Ling Chuan lowered the bow, sensing her presence without even turning his head around. He knew that to survive this lawless frontier, absolute power was the only true currency. The news of the failed ambush would soon reach the corrupt officers who ordered his death. Ling Chuan intended to greet those corrupt traitors with cold steel and absolute destruction. Suddenly, a frantic warning bell began to toll loudly from the top of the frozen outpost tower. Heavy, unidentified footsteps echoed from the heavy iron gates as an unexpected massive threat arrived at the pass. The heavy iron gates groaned under a series of violent, echoing blows that instantly shattered the silence of the courtyard. Ling Chuan immediately lowered his center of gravity, his hand instinctively gripping the hilt of his concealed blade. The solid wood and iron structure shuddered once more before swinging wide open to reveal a detachment of heavily armored riders. At the forefront of the cavalry rode Regional Inspector Zhao, his face twisted into a look of absolute disdain for the desolate outpost. Inspector Zhao held up an official crimson scroll, demanding to see the garrison commander to audit the outpost supplies.
Ling Chuan stepped forward from the shadows of the barracks, his expression entirely neutral as he assessed the political trap unfolding before him.
The corrupt inspector immediately accused the remaining garrison of insubordination and the embezzlement of imperial grain reserves. Instead of showing fear, Ling Chuan pulled a hidden ledger from his vest containing meticulous records of the previous officer's corruption. He coolly detailed every bribe and illegal sale executed by the deceased commander, effectively turning the tables on the inspector's threats. Recognizing the names of high-ranking co-conspirators listed within the book, Inspector Zhao's face turned a pale, sickly white. Ling Chuan offered a quiet compromise, suggesting that a total transfer of local command would keep these treasonous names forever secret. Trapped by his own greed and complicity, the terrified inspector hastily signed an emergency field promotion decree on the spot. With the signed document firmly in hand, Ling Chuan officially assumed absolute command of the Wolf Beacon Pass garrison. The corrupt inspector and his retinue quickly retreated into the darkening blizzard, eager to escape the terrifying young soldier. Turning to the ragged assembly of soldiers, Ling Chuan announced that the era of starvation and weakness was officially over. He ordered an immediate audit of all remaining operational structures, noting every single crack in the freezing perimeter walls. The very next morning, Ling Chuan gathered the men to introduce a completely revolutionary concept of survival craft. Utilizing his elite special forces knowledge, he began sketching blueprints for specialized multi-layered insulated winter gear. He taught the camp tailors how to trap body heat by layering discarded animal pelts beneath heavy windproof treated canvas. Within days, the soldiers shed their useless rags for tactical, lightweight thermal uniforms that permitted full combat mobility. Next, Ling Chuan modified the standard infantry boots, adding deep-treaded leather soles and hidden metal ice cleats for stability. Warm and properly equipped for the first time in their lives, morale among the long-suffering troops soared exponentially. But Ling Chuan knew that physical comfort meant nothing without an absolute defense against the hostile factions beyond the pass. He organized the entire garrison into labor divisions, marking the beginning of the grand fortification of Wolf Beacon Pass. To counter enemy siege tactics, he introduced a unique recipe for rapid hardening concrete mixed with local volcanic ash and gravel. Laborers poured the advanced mixture into heavy wooden frames, reinforcing the weak stone walls with thick, seamless outer layers. As the mixture cured in the freezing air, it created an impenetrable dark barrier completely immune to normal battering rams. Ling Chuan then designed a complex network of hidden arrow slits and interlocking kill zones along the entire perimeter path. Any invading force entering the narrow valley would now find themselves exposed to fire from 3 completely separate angles. To ensure absolute supremacy, he supervised the construction of massive, counterweighted mechanical ballistas on the high towers. These engineered siege weapons could launch heavy steel-tipped iron bolts over a distance of half a mile with deadly accuracy. In the evenings, Ling Chuan returned to his quarters, where Suli carefully tended to his minor cuts and exhaustion. She looked at him with profound respect, marveling at how a supposedly low-ranking soldier possessed the mind of a legendary general. Ling Chuan merely smiled, promising her that this fortress would soon become a safe haven that no empire could ever threaten. Weeks flew by, and the desolate, broken outpost transformed into a beautiful, towering citadel of dark stone and shining iron. The regular training regimen he established turned the formerly abused conscripts into disciplined, lethal, tactical operators. One chilly afternoon, a lookout at the highest northern watchtower spotted a cloud of dust rising rapidly from the horizon. Through the biting haze, a massive army of rival northern tribal factions could be seen marching directly toward the pass. The sheer volume of the enemy forces far exceeded any normal raid, indicating a total, calculated war of extermination. Deep, resonant war horns echoed through the canyon walls, striking immediate dread into the hearts of the younger recruits. Ling Chuan climbed the grand battlements slowly, his hand resting lightly on his masterfully crafted tactical recurve bow. He looked over at his disciplined men, seeing the lingering hesitation in their eyes transform into sharp focus under his gaze. Raising his arm, he gave the command to prime the heavy ballistas, the sound of ratcheting iron gears drowning out the enemy horns. As the enemy horde sprinted blindly into the primary kill zone, Ling Chuan noticed a shadowy figure leading them from the rear. The mysterious leader raised a glowing runic staff, casting a dark crimson aura that instantly supercharged the barbarians with supernatural strength. Suddenly, the reinforced earth beneath the citadel's primary wall began to crack violently as an unexpected underground tremor shook the foundations. The violent tremors continued to ripple through the outer perimeter, threatening to undo months of defensive construction. Ling Chuan calmly surveyed the shifting ground, recognizing that this was a deliberate subterranean sabotage attempt rather than a natural earthquake. He immediately issued precise hand signals to his elite garrison, directing them to deploy the specialized seismic listening tubes he had previously designed. Armed soldiers quickly drove the iron rods into the frozen earth to trace the source of the subterranean digging. A hidden faction of local traders had allied with rival outlaws to tunnel beneath the central treasury in a desperate bid to dismantle Ling Chuan's authority. Anticipating this exact vulnerability, Ling Chuan led a heavily armed counter-tunneling squad directly into the breach. The saboteurs gasped in horror as the solid earth wall ahead of them collapsed to reveal the cold, unyielding gaze of the legendary commander. Ling Chuan did not offer them a chance to surrender, releasing a rapid succession of steel-tipped arrows that silenced the leading conspirators instantly. Within minutes, the remaining rival outlaws were disarmed, bound in heavy chains, and dragged out into the public square for execution. Ling Chuan stood before the assembled townspeople and soldiers, declaring that any further attempts to destabilize the region would be met with absolute obliteration. The populace erupted into thunderous cheers, finally feeling secure under the rule of a leader who possessed both absolute tactical power and unyielding resolve. With all local traitors decisively purged and rival factions utterly defeated, the true modernization of Wolf Beacon Pass could proceed without further hindrance. To celebrate this historic dawn of prosperity, Ling Chuan announced that a grand wedding feast would be held to formalize his marriage with Suli. The entire outpost transformed into a vibrant sea of crimson banners, silk lanterns, and fragrant evergreen decorations. Inside the private quarters, Suli looked at her reflection in a polished bronze mirror, wearing an elegant crimson bridal silk gown that highlighted her noble heritage. She remembered her days of exile and suffering, marveling at how this extraordinary man had given her a life of profound safety, respect, and love. Ling Chuan entered the room clad in magnificent dark steel ceremonial armor over a deep red tunic, looking every bit the legendary warlord he had become. He extended his scarred hand to her, his sharp eyes softening into an expression of deep devotion and absolute protection. Suli placed her hand in his, feeling the immense strength and warmth that had successfully reshaped the destiny of the entire northern frontier. As the couple stepped out onto the grand balcony, thousands of soldiers and townspeople raised their cups, cheering for their unbeatable commander and his radiant lady. Giant iron cauldrons filled with rich, roasted meats and savory winter stews were distributed freely to every single resident of the territory. The true highlight of the feast was the reveal of high-grade distilled spirits, a secret technique Ling Chuan had brought from his former life. The soldiers had never tasted an alcohol so pure, fierce, and warming, instantly melting away the bitter chill of the northern winter. This legendary drink cemented the fierce loyalty of the men who swore they would follow Ling Chuan into the very depths of hell itself. Ling Chuan poured a measure of the premium spirit into 2 silver goblets, handing one to his beautiful bride. They linked arms and drank together, finalizing a blood vow of mutual respect, shared power, and eternal devotion before their subjects. Music played from traditional stringed instruments, filling the once barren mountain pass with a profound sense of culture and celebration. The former corrupt squad leaders and regional threats were nothing but a distant memory, replaced entirely by a merit-based brotherhood of iron discipline. Wolf Beacon Pass was no longer an isolated freezing graveyard for forgotten convicts, but a thriving autonomous citadel of commerce and tactical strength. The unique agricultural greenhouses and highly engineered heating systems Ling Chuan introduced guaranteed that they would never suffer from hunger again.
Merchants from distant southern provinces were already arriving, drawn by the rumor of an absolute military powerhouse, producing unmatched tactical gear and luxury spirits.
Suli rested her head against Ling Chuan's strong shoulder, watching the joyous, uninhibited dancing of the townspeople below. He wrapped his heavy fur cloak around both of them, shielding her from the gentle, drifting snowflakes that fell through the open courtyard ceiling. In his mind, Ling Chuan acknowledged that his transition from an elite special forces operative to this new world was finally complete. He had not just survived the betrayal of his past life, he had rebuilt an entire civilization from the ashes of neglect and corruption. Every soldier under his command was now a lethal weapon, trained in advanced tactical maneuvers and survival arts that surpassed any imperial army. The Northern Territory was entirely secure, and no external empire or greedy official would ever dare to threaten this sovereign stronghold. Looking down at the peaceful face of his wife, Ling Chuan knew that this harsh frontier had become his true, permanent home. The celebratory songs continued long into the night, echoing through the Grand Canyons as a permanent testament to their absolute victory. Standing at the apex of his absolute power, the Reborn elite special forces soldier had firmly established an immortal legend that would shape history for generations to come.